This story begins February 15, 1960. On that day, I was born a star child on the 33rd parallel at Vandenberg Air Force Base on the southern coast of California, where my father was in the control room and launched our country's first ICBM intercontinental ballistic missile. I'm going to show you the launch because it's an important part of the story, as you will see later. My name is Barry Oberpriller, now an adult starseed. I was not born normal in any stretch of the imagination. I actually prefer to label myself neurodiverse as opposed to neurotypical. My bioelectromagnetic field has been significantly magnified, which in turn means I have enhanced psychic abilities. In the telling of this story, I have used several of my stronger traits, such as three-dimensional visualization, geometry, forensics, precognition, clairvoyancy, intuition, time dilation and contraction, collective consciousness, telepathy, and dyslexia. Basically, I was the problem child who didn't follow rules and was not good at consuming and regurgitating all the wrong information fed to me. Because of all this, many extraordinary and unexplained things and events have happened to me throughout my lifetime. This story that I'm about to tell for the very first time is one of them. I must warn you, you're going to be stunned and amazed, and many of you simply won't believe it, which is understandable. There's going to be a lot to take in here. Before I begin this story, you should know a little more about me. I'm an old eccentric inventor, much like Doc Brown in Back to the Future. My home naturally reflects my eccentricity, from my front gate to my custom concrete front door. I molded in a replica of the solar system I'm probably from. Exactly and only when the summer solstice sets each year, the three orbs become illuminated, fashioning a single beam of light directly onto the planet Earth, which I molded into my kitchen countertops. I love the pictures of deep space from the Hubble telescope, so I made my countertops resemble them as much as humanly possible. And yes, I live in a Back to the Future Doc Brown house, which incidentally won the Best House in the World award at World of Concrete in Vegas. And yes, I have a flux capacitor, as you will see later in the video. And there are a few other things. I don't own a computer, have never used one. I don't have a smartphone, so obviously I don't tweet, text, or Facebook, or anything of that nature. I see it as voluntary simplicity. Keep the mind sharp. So I guess you can call me old school. I think I'm still chugging along okay so far. Finally, you should know, I made this video with my 20-year-old analog equipment. I never stopped liking film, so don't expect too many gee whiz factors or anything glitzy. Now, just sit back and let this old geezer amaze you, or not.
In advancing this concept, Vandenberg Air Force Base, California, has become the first aerospace operations center of the Air Force. Upon completion of checkout, early on the morning of September 9th, 1959, the operations controller at the Combat Control Center's SAC Headquarters, Omaha, used the red phone for immediate contact with the officer in charge at Vandenberg. This was the long-awaited command to launch an Atlas missile. Immediately, the order was relayed to Launch Control Officer in the blockhouse. The lights on the standby status panel in a ready position, the Launch Control Officer directed launch operator to start the automatic sequence and countdown. Then, as the seconds ticked off, the atmosphere in the blockhouse became electrified as operators and technicians manned the consoles. Support crews performed their last-minute duties with clock-like precision. And then, Vandenberg had scored again, successfully launching its first intercontinental ballistic missile.
That is my father on the right, Major Oberpriller. His call name was Obi. These are his insignias. Many years ago, I was on a VIP tour at NASA Cape Canaveral Space Center. I wasn't really a VIP, that's what the tour was called if you sprang the extra bucks for the up-close and behind-the-scenes stuff. I got separated from the pack and ended up in a dimly lit corridor looking for the restroom. Out of nowhere, a door suddenly sprang open, and the person coming out and I literally ran into each other. It seemed that we were destined to meet. That person turned out to be a real-life astronaut. He was wearing his blue astronaut jumpsuit and was in an obvious hurry to get to his next meeting. I had never met or talked to an astronaut before, so I thought, this is pretty cool. Remember, I was at NASA because I'm a space junkie. He appreciated my enthusiasm and invited me to walk with him to his next meeting. I said all the stupid stuff he probably hears every day, like, I always wanted to be an astronaut, but it obviously never worked out. He was starting to tell me about his upcoming mission when he was swarmed by a group of real VIPs. As he was being swished away, he turned back to me, reached into his pocket, and handed me his mission patch. Just stay creative, he said. That's what the world's going to need most from you. As we shook hands, I gladly thanked him for his time and for the mission patch. Less than a year later, Commander Rick Husband and his crew died in the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster. Needless to say, the mission patch Colonel Rick Husband gave me became one of my most sacred belongings. I keep it with my father's Air Force medals and insignias. About a year ago, I was watching a program about the JFK assassination. It showed an image of Dealey Plaza from above. I immediately paused the image, not knowing exactly why. As I was staring at it, something began to look familiar. And that's when it happened. Completely out of nowhere, I could see the silhouette of the space shuttle clear as day. The only shuttle image I had at the time was the STS-107 mission patch, the one Rick Husband had given me. I told my wife she needed to come see this. Sure enough, the patch fit the exact profile of Dealey Plaza. Neither one of us had any idea as to what this could possibly mean. That night I had a dream, more like a vision, in which I was shown the key that was going to shed new light on our future by unlocking part of our past. The first thing this key is going to show us is how two of our nation's most tragic events, the assassination of JFK and the loss of Columbia Space Shuttle, are directly correlated with each other in perfect synchronicity. In fact, the key even gives us clues as to who orchestrated both events and why. So yes, we are talking about conspiracy stuff here. However, I urge you to withhold your judgment until you have seen all the decoded evidence. Let's begin decoding. The first thing I want to show you is how well the space shuttle silhouette perfectly aligns with Dealey Plaza. Notice how the two pergolas align with the shuttle's engines. Next, let's overlay the mission patch and look at the similarities between it and the plaza. The street lamps are represented on the patch by the 7 stars in the constellation Columbia, also representing the 7 astronauts. The green trees and the pool are depicted on the patch as the ocean and continents in the same corner. And here's something very interesting. Notice Willie McCool, the pilot, is right next to Willis, an important witness in the JFK assassination, and by the pool. The next significant thing we're going to do is examine and illuminate the Freemasons' connection to both Dealey Plaza and the shuttle mission patch. These will prove to be very important details that will lead to many more doors opening up for us. Dealey Plaza, the western gateway to Dallas, was completed in 1940. The plaza was named after George B. Dealey, a prominent Dallas businessman at the time and a well-known 33-degree Scottish Rite Mason. In 1837, Dealey Plaza was the homestead of the father of Dallas, John Neely Bryan, also a Freemason, and the site of the first Masonic Lodge of Dallas, located in the then floodplain of the Trinity River. That lodge has since been razed, but there is a historic plaque in the plaza designating the original location. An old fire station located on Elm Street, now gone, was known as the Blue Front Tavern and was the official Masonic hangout, a tavern very similar to the Green Dragon Tavern in Boston, also a very popular Masonic watering hole. Bloody Elm Street, as it was known back then, was the scene of a great deal of violence involving gunfights and stabbings. Masonic legend tells us that a very prominent businessman, Alexander Crockwell, who bought the property from John Neely Bryan and developed the historic area that was the foundation of Dallas, was struck down and murdered in front of the Blue Wall Tavern by 3 ruffians who demanded money. It is obvious that Dealey Plaza was and still is a sacred site for Freemasons, but there is still much more to reveal here. Now, let's look at the patch again, but this time with a different eye. Each shuttle mission had its own unique patch. The STS-107 patch was the only one shaped like the shuttle itself. It also has the most vibrant and iridescent colors of all the mission patches. Most importantly, this patch is riddled with hidden Masonic symbology. Let's begin with the most obvious, the blazing star, one of the most important symbols of Freemasonry. It has multiple meanings. It represents God, the Star of Bethlehem, prudence, beauty, and the sun. It symbolizes enlightenment, that which the Masons consider themselves to be. Here the shuttle appears to be led by the Star of Bethlehem. The letter G is also clearly present here. It stands for the great architect of the universe and for geometry, which is the mathematical science upon which architecture and masonry were founded. Geometry was very necessary in the shaping and the fitting of the thousands of heat tiles that make up the shuttle's heat shield. Not a single one is alike. This was clearly a work of master masons. Geometry is also very necessary for navigating in space. The famous square and compass is also hidden within the mission patch. The square is the symbol of morality, to square our actions, getting a square deal. The compass exemplifies our wisdom of conduct, the strength to circumscribe our desires and to keep our passions in check. The square and compass are tools used to build strong foundations and to craft geometrically and precision-cut stones or spaceships. Next is the Ark of the Covenant, contained within the name of one of Columbia's astronauts, Clark. It is vital to understand that the light which emanates from the Ark within Solomon's Temple is central to Freemasonry's foundation, not the temple itself. Just as man's spirit is the light housed within his body, so too is the Ark of the Covenant, the light within the temple. The Masons believe that men become better by living God's commandments, which are contained within the Ark. The 7 astronauts were the guardian angels for the Ark. The shuttle represents the Ark as the container. The astronauts represent the spirit life, and NASA is the temple, all designed to carry God's greatness to the heavens. Maybe least obvious of all is the all-seeing eye, represented here in the patch as the rising sun on the horizon. The Masonic eye is symbolic of the eye of God. It is the symbol of divine watchfulness and ever-present care of the universe. Solomon alludes to this when he says, "The eyes of the Lord are in every place beholding, keeping watch upon the evil and the good." It also symbolizes the center of order in the unconsciousness. The all-seeing eye in this mission patch was supposed to represent the rising sun, but unfortunately, in true actuality, it instead depicts the demise of Columbia burning up on re-entry into Earth's atmosphere, clearly indicating Columbia was doomed from the start. The all-seeing eye of God witnessed the killing of his 7 heavenly angels. The final symbology, hidden in the mission patch, is the pentagram overlaid on our nation's reverse seal, clearly spelling the word Mason. When we overlay the same pentagram onto the 107 mission patch, we see the word Mason spelled out almost the same way. But we also see Mason appear in 2 of the astronauts' names, Anderson and Raymond. What I have been trying to do up till now is lay the groundwork, setting the stage, if you will, for the next part of the story. This is a very deep, complex, and disturbing story, not for the faint of heart, but very necessary to shed new light, as you will see. I hope at this point it is clear to you that it is almost impossible to deny the synchronicity between Dealey Plaza, Columbia Space Shuttle, and the Freemasons. My next objective is to directly link the assassination of JFK to the Columbia disaster. Even though these two events are separated by 40 years in time, they have more in common than one can possibly imagine. We all know JFK was murdered, supposedly by Lee Harvey Oswald. Much more on this later. And most people believe the Columbia accident was just an unfortunate disaster. NASA said the foam did it, and that may be true. I am going to show you a lot more evidence. Evidence that clearly points to the Freemasons as the assassins of not just JFK, but also the 7 astronauts. I personally have never put a lot of faith in numerology. Numbers are just numbers. Or maybe not. Let's take a look. We know Dealey Plaza is almost directly on the 33rd parallel, the place Kennedy was killed. Columbia began breaking up directly above, 39 miles above Dealey Plaza, disintegrating in a long debris field directly along the 33rd parallel. The last time one of the shuttles came in on the same approach was over 6 years earlier. It is very rare. Most of the time, re-entry is over the oceans and or the Gulf of Mexico. By the way, of all the secret societies in the world, the only one in which the number 33 is important is the secret cult of Freemasonry. Kennedy was killed on the 11th month, on the 22nd day, and on the 33rd parallel. 11 plus 22 equals 33. Did Columbia have any other connection to the 33rd parallel? Yes. The constellation Columbia is represented by the 7 stars on the left wing of the mission patch. The constellation is located directly on the 33rd parallel up in the sky. I am just beginning to piece all this together. There is much more compelling evidence to come and a lot more in numbers. As you can now see, the patch fits Dealey Plaza like a custom glove, or more precisely, I believe the mission patch is more like a key that fits into the keyhole perfectly. What we're going to do now is insert the key, turn it, and begin deciphering the secret encrypted information the Freemasons hid. But in order to do this, we must compare the key with our nation's Great Seal, both the obverse side, the front, and the reverse side, the back. First, let's look at the similarities of the key with the obverse side of the seal. Both the shuttle and the eagle are mighty creations. They both have wings and can fly. Both birds have a protective shield. The eagle has a traditional shield, the shield of faith. It has 13 red and white stripes. The shield is not fastened to the eagle, but rather held on by the unseen hand of God. The shuttle too has a shield of faith, the black heat shield on its underside and on its leading edges to protect it from extreme heat of re-entry. The eagle has an olive branch clutched in its right claw. The olive branch is the universal symbol of peace. On the left wing of the shuttle is a cluster of 7 stars arranged in the formation of the constellation Columbia, the dove, signifying peace. In the eagle's left claw are 13 arrows. This is a symbol of war-making power and attack from the air. On the right wing of the shuttle is the Israeli flag. This is also a symbol of war-making power and represents the 13 lost tribes of Israel, not the original 13 colonies as we've been led to believe. Above the eagle's head are 13 stars engulfed in a circular cloud with rays of fire emanating from it. 13 stars above the eagle now become just one lone star above the shuttle, emerging through a ring of fire. Both the key and the seal have a golden banner flowing in the wind. The banner in the eagle's beak reads, E pluribus unum, out of many one. The 13 lost tribes become the single star, one tribe. The banner in the dove's beak, Columbia, reads UG, for micro zero gravity. The single star is suspended in zero gravity, just like the floating capstone above the pyramid. Also, the Great Seal is contained in a blue sphere representing Earth, and the blue planet Earth is clearly displayed on the shuttle's right wing. Let's now compare the key with the reverse side of the Great Seal. After 150 years of obscurity, the seal's reverse was presented to the U.S. for the first time in 1935 on the back of the U.S. $1 bill. The pyramid, composed of 13 levels, represents strength and duration, signifying a mountain or Mother Earth. The STS-113 shuttle sitting on the launch pad appears to have a pyramidal shape. At the base of the pyramid on the dollar is the Latin date MD CCLXXV1. Numerically, this represents the sum total of 26, the final age of the Space Shuttle Columbia. The pyramid on the dollar has the all-seeing eye, sun, encased in a small triangle suspended above it, not touching. The shuttle has the lone star sun above it, seeming to be aloft as well. The pyramid, or mountain, represents Mother Earth, without human consciousness. It means feminine. The word Columbia literally means the feminine personification of the United States. The shuttle was the mothership, which came in peace, a large flying white dove, not a war machine, a vessel which contains, protects, and nourishes those within. On the banner under the pyramid reads, Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means New World Order, or New Order of the Ages, a secret destiny, if you will. For thousands of years, secret societies have cultivated an ancient plan which has powerfully influenced and created world-changing events. Let's now look at two of these events with much more insight and clarity. There are still many unanswered questions regarding the JFK assassination and the Columbia disaster. Let's try to answer them using more decoded information. When and if the capstone is finally set on top of the pyramid becomes whole. The union of consciousness and unconsciousness creates self-consciousness, through which man becomes whole, individualized, and self-actualized. This is exactly what the Cabal is trying to stop, and herein lies humanity's greatest challenge. I believe the key can not only unlock our past, it can also provide us a glimpse into our future. But before we venture into the great unknown, we must first decode parts of our past. Before I continue this story, now is a good time to make some disclaimers regarding the Freemasons. Up until now, I've talked about the Freemasons in a very general manner, not really defining who they are or are not. Remember, they are a secret society of which I am not a member, just like most of you. We know the vast majority of Freemasons are good and decent people who only mean to do good in the world. Many of our nation's founding fathers were Freemasons. This is where it gets a little tricky. There are unseen fraternities within the Brotherhood who are unknown, disguised, and secretly hiding behind a veil of deceit. They are small in number, but very rich, powerful, and evil. They hide themselves like parasites in the good lodges of the Masons. They are the Cabal. They hatch their plots without anybody even knowing they are doing so. 4 of the most dangerous groups are the Bilderberg, the Illuminati, the Skull and Bones, and the most dangerous of all, the Cabal. Most of these players are ancestrally connected to the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and all the world's central banks. They, in one fashion or another, own most of the world's wealth and create all the evil in the world. They also have a complete hatred for all that is feminine, because the female represents our emotional and caring side. The Cabal is the name I shall now use to identify these hybrid evil beings. Because they secretly hide themselves within the larger Brotherhood of the Freemasons, it is impossible to untangle the two. The good Masons know who they are, and if they choose to deny or ignore the presence of the Cabal that lurks within their fraternity, they do so at their own peril. At this point in the story, I will make references to the Freemasons and to the Cabal interchangeably to get to the heart of the quest. On November 22, 1963, the Cabal sacrificed John F. Kennedy in one of their most sacred places, Dealey Plaza. On that day, we in the world lost one of its greatest leaders. We also lost our innocence in our quest for moral excellence. It was an assault on our country, on every single thing we stand for. The Cabal revels in just such evil. But why Kennedy? Because JFK considered secret societies to be repugnant. He strongly believed all societies should be free and open. To the Cabal, Kennedy was a feminization of U.S. power. He was striving for world peace. He wanted out of the Vietnam War and was trying to achieve a denuclearization of the world. Kennedy was striving to set the capstone atop the pyramid in an attempt to create a self-actualized country and world. These are all the things the Cabal detests. The Masons always conduct their human sacrifices on or near the 33rd parallel, and they always use 3 assassins. The assassins are known as the unworthy craftsmen. In most cases, one of the 3 assassins is sacrificed so that the other 2 can make a clean getaway. But in the Kennedy case, all 3 assassins made a clean getaway, leaving Oswald as the one and only fall guy. Oswald was definitely not one of the 3 assassins. First of all, he just wasn't a cold-blooded killer. And second, he actually liked and looked up to President Kennedy, as most of us did. Also, several witnesses saw Oswald drinking a Coke in the lunchroom at the time of the shooting. The person who fired on Kennedy from the 6th floor window, striking him only once through his throat, was a highly trained CIA assassin and an Oswald look-alike. This look-alike was seen throughout the Dallas area prior to the assassination, buying guns and shooting them off at various gun ranges, deliberately trying to frame the real Oswald. The CIA knew Oswald was not capable of killing the president, but because he craved recognition and attention, it would be easy to make him the fall guy, or a patsy, as Oswald declared soon after. Jack Ruby made sure Oswald would never be given a chance to defend himself. Now we must ask, who and where were the other 2 shooters, who also made clean getaways? This is where the story gets very interesting. Believe it or not, the key tells this part of the story as well. Again, if we look more carefully at the rising sun, the all-seeing eye, it marks the exact spot on Bloody Elm Street where the president received his mortal head wound. It also marks the exact spot where Columbia received its mortal wing wound, but on the left wing, not the right wing. The red tracer lines clearly show shots being fired from the grassy knoll area. Incidentally, this assassin fired twice, but missed his target both times. The 2 bullets are most likely still buried in the ground on the other side of Elm Street. A metal detector could possibly find them. The key also shows a red tracer line coming from behind. This, in fact, was the fatal shot that hit Kennedy in the back of his head. Unlike the full metal jacket round that struck Kennedy through his throat and then into Governor Connally, this fatal shot was a hollow point bullet, resulting in total destruction to Kennedy's head and brain. How could this be possible? This is where the number 107 comes in. Columbia's original flight number was STS-107, but after many delays it actually ended up being mission STS-113. Nonetheless, the mission patch was still clearly 107. This number had to have significance, but what could it possibly be? My first inclination was to find a 107 address in Dealey Plaza that might give us a clue as to where the 3rd shooter may have been located. Sure enough, after Googling 107 South Houston Street, it amazingly shows up right in the middle of the intersection of Main and Houston Streets. Very odd, I thought. After calling many people in the surrounding buildings, I was told over and over again that there was no 107 street address anywhere. But Google's map kept indicating otherwise and clearly wanted me to take notice. The plot thickens. Right after the shooting, Lee Harvey Oswald, the real one, took a bus, then a cab back to his boarding room. The house cleaner witnessed him enter his room and then a few minutes later heard a vehicle lightly toot its horn twice out front. As she looked out the door, she noticed that the waiting vehicle was a Dallas police car with 2 police officers in it. The number on the car was 107. A few moments after, she watched Oswald coming out of his room. At that moment, the cleaning lady was temporarily distracted. When she looked back outside, Oswald and the police vehicle were both gone. According to author James W. Douglas, JFK the Unspeakable, Patrol Car 107 was retired from the Dallas police fleet 4 months earlier and was sold to a local junkyard. The new 107 was not going to be in service for another 3 months after the assassination. So, we know for a fact that this 107 police car was a fake, but who were the 2 officers riding in it? Back to the Google marker. I was looking for a picture of a Dallas police car to help tell this story. Upon examining footage of the carnage after the assassination took place, I noticed a split-second frame of a Dallas police car. It was turning right from Main Street onto South Houston Street. This had to be several minutes after the shooting because this vehicle was at the tail end of the procession. Well, Lo and behold, the number on the door of this police car was 107. It had 2 police officers in the front. The fake 107 car showed up exactly where Google Maps kept indicating it would be. Please keep in mind, this is brand new evidence, never before seen. I am 100% certain that the passenger in car 107 was the third assassin and the one who killed Kennedy. He was most likely a CIA operative. I believe the driver was an active duty Dallas police officer. He was too obvious. He had to have connections with other officers involved in the assassination. The assassin was dropped off at or near this intersection a few minutes before the arrival of Kennedy. Because there were Dallas police officers here and there, nobody took notice, not even for the fact that he was carrying a rifle. He set up the kill shot in the north pergola, fired only once, but that's all it took. The casing's probably still there. Just a few minutes later, we see him leaving the crime scene in the fake 107, on their way to pick up the next assassin, the Oswald look-alike, at the very next corner. Notice the first picture of the Texas School Book Depository taken right after the shooting. The clock on top of the building reads 107. The grassy knoll shooter seems to have just disappeared, either down the railroad tracks or somebody picked him up too. Car 107 then drives across town, drops off the look-alike near the Texas Theater, where he shoots and kills Officer Tippit. After the shooting, he hides in the theater. Meanwhile, 107 goes and picks up Oswald at his place and then takes him to the theater. Here, Oswald is apprehended by the Dallas police with a handgun in his possession. At this time, the look-alike slips out the back door to the waiting 107 vehicle. He is driven down to the banks of the Trinity River, where he gets on board a military aircraft that had no identification, most likely operated by the CIA. He was flown to Roswell Air Force Base in New Mexico and never seen again. If you're interested and want to know more, I suggest reading the book Flight from Dallas by James P. Johnson and John Rowe, if you can still find a copy. The triple underpass at Dealey Plaza represented Kennedy's 3 assassins. He most likely died as he passed under it. It also represented the missing capstone above the pyramid and the decapitation of the Space Shuttle program. Over the eye above the pyramid is an inscription, Annuit Coeptus, Latin for He favors our undertakings. To venture into the management of the morgue, the Masons decide whose body will be at the funeral and where and how the life will be taken. This fits their demonic mythology, which demonstrates their worldly power by spilling human blood at sacred locations such as Dealey Plaza. LBJ, as next in line for the presidency, was the most direct beneficiary of JFK's death. He was a Freemason who hated the first Catholic president. At that time, Kennedy's church condemned membership in Freemasonry under pain of excommunication. One of Johnson's first acts as president was to call the Dallas police to order them to stop their investigation because they already had their man, Oswald. Johnson was completely supported by J. Edgar Hoover, a well-known Freemason and the director of the FBI. We also know most of the members of the Warren Commission were Freemasons. The Freemasons believed that the killing of the king was necessary before they could place Freemasons on the moon. Many of the Apollo astronauts were Masons. The reason no one pointed a finger at anyone except Lee Harvey Oswald is because Masons take an oath and are sworn to protect their brother Freemasons should they ever engage in immoral or criminal conduct. I believe the CIA was instrumental in setting Kennedy up for the kill. First, his limousine made a slow-speed right turn onto South Houston Street, right at the 107. Then a hard 120-degree turn to the left, resulting in a near-complete stop, right out in the open with no cover. And what I mean by cover is that there was not a single Secret Service agent assigned on foot anywhere in Dealey Plaza at the time of the ambush. No one from his own team was looking out for Kennedy's personal safety at the most vulnerable time in the procession. His shield of faith failed him here. Here's a photo of a man who looks just like George Bush, standing right in front of the Texas Book Depository at the time of the shooting. Maybe, maybe not, but I do believe George Bush was definitely involved to some capacity, and so that would be the skull and bones connection. A photo of Dealey Plaza from above clearly shows 2 large skulls. Before Kennedy died, he was able to cleverly, skillfully, and diplomatically talk the Russians out of nuclear war, thus averting World War III. We lost a great president, and the cabal lost their opportunity to destroy the world at the time. Before I move on to the Columbia disaster, this is my last observation on the Kennedy assassination. This mysterious building appears in the background on what I believe is Mockingbird Lane. Someone edited the film because this building did not, nor has it ever existed in Dallas. It very much resembles a Jewish mosque. This is a picture of the building that should have been in the film. Who did this and why? It appears to be a calling card. It is now time to re-examine the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster. Just as Kennedy was taken out by a high-speed projectile, a bullet, in Dealey Plaza in direct correlation with the 33rd parallel, so too were the 7 astronauts aboard Columbia. They were in a guided high-speed projectile, the shuttle, almost directly above Dealey Plaza, again in direct correlation with the 33rd parallel. If not for Kennedy boosting the space program, there may never have been the shuttle fleet. As I have already mentioned, this exact landing approach to Cape Canaveral was rarely used. The last time was over 6 years prior. Most of the re-entries were over the oceans and/or the Gulf of Mexico. It is very ironic that the first piece of wreckage, a heat shield tile, was found in Littleton, Texas, a small town directly between Amarillo and Lubbock, which are about 112 miles apart. Commander Rick Husband was a native of Amarillo. He was born, raised, learned to fly, married, and eventually was buried there. The local airport is now named after him. Willie McCool, the pilot of Columbia, lived in Lubbock during his high school years. In fact, Rick attended Texas Tech in Lubbock at the same time Willie's mother was teaching there. Not that it's important, but I grew up in Eltis, Oklahoma. Living very close to one another and under very similar conditions, the three of us grew up redneck cowboys. Like I said before, this is a great big world. What are the chances of this happening randomly? My father was a C-141 flight instructor at Eltis Air Force Base. Prior to this assignment, we were stationed at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. There he flew dozens of missions back and forth to Vietnam, almost always returning with his aircraft full of dead warriors. This is the same Air Force Base the 7 deceased astronauts were taken to. Commander Ellen Collins was the first to return to flight after the Columbia disaster on STS-114. She was also a 141 pilot and most likely got her training at Eltis. This mission of Columbia was delayed 18 times, much more than any other mission, 2.5 years of actual delay time. Because Columbia was the first and oldest shuttle in the fleet, it needed major updates. It was flown piggyback on NASA's 747 back to Boeing for a complete overhaul. Most of the delays were the result of being bumped by what NASA considered more necessary missions. After an extensive investigation of the accident, NASA was 100% convinced the left external tank bipod foam broke off during launch and struck the leading under edge of the left wing, creating a large hole in one of the RCC reinforced carbon-carbon panels. This in turn allowed superheated plasma to enter the wing on re-entry, literally melting the left wing from the inside out, resulting in total catastrophic breakup of the entire vehicle. The left bipod foam had fallen off of several prior missions, always the left side, never the right side. This was the first time that almost the entire foam chunk, 90% of it, came off and struck the wing as seen in the liftoff video. After seeing the video, many NASA engineers were very concerned that significant damage may have occurred. NASA did notify the crew about the foam strike, but assured them that they did not consider it to be a problem. In fact, under protest from several engineers, NASA refused the opportunity to have high-resolution images taken from either ground or satellite cameras that may very well have shown that there was indeed significant damage to the left wing, possibly allowing ample time to assemble a rescue mission. It is important to point out that this mission did not have the long hydraulic mechanical arm on board. This was an experimental mission. Nothing needed to be assembled or fixed outside the vehicle. The irony here is that if they did have the arm, it could easily have been used to examine the underside of the wing. It must also be noted that 2 of the astronauts on board had spacesuits and were trained to perform emergency spacewalks if needed. This would have been a very risky procedure because there just wasn't anything to hang on to. One of the astronauts would literally have to dangle the other over the edge by holding on to his feet. Even though both astronauts would have an umbilical cord attaching them to the vehicle, NASA's top management refused the spacewalk based on the risk factor. This procedure was not even discussed with the crew. Remember, top management at NASA did not even think this was a problem. So here we have 7 astronauts orbiting the Earth without the slightest inclination of the dire situation they were in. NASA believed that even if there was damage to the wing, there was nothing anyone could do to fix it. This was most likely true. However, the crew still could have been rescued, but not by the space station, as it was in a totally different orbit and the Shuttle Columbia simply did not have enough fuel to change orbit and to rendezvous with it. Their only hope would have been the Space Shuttle Atlantis. It was already in the vertical position on the launch pad being prepped for its next mission. There were several engineers at NASA who believed Atlantis could have been rushed through procedures, allowing just enough time to save the crew. But again, top management said no. There was just too much risk involved. Because NASA's top management said no to all attempts for rescue, they lost the entire crew and the Space Shuttle Columbia. The question we need to ask is, why did this happen? When Apollo 13 had their life or death situation, everyone at NASA worked together in a heroic effort to save the crew, and save them they did. But this time NASA didn't so much as lift a finger to try to save this crew. Maybe nothing would have worked, but to give up without a fight just isn't the American way. I'm sure, if permitted, the astronauts would have taken the risky spacewalk. And I'm equally sure, if permitted, the astronauts would have flown Atlantis to the rescue in a heroic attempt to save their colleagues and friends. Was all this planned out by the unforeseen hand of the cabal? Why did NASA say no to the high-resolution images, to the spacewalk, and to the rescue with Atlantis? Were they covering up something? Why this time did the foam come off the bipod almost in its entirety? And why was it always the left bipod? Many engineers at NASA did not believe the foam was a smoking gun. As counterintuitive as it sounds, I do believe the chunk of foam could have done it. The RCC panels were not built and designed to withstand any kind of impact, whether it was ice, birds, or foam chunks. Their primary purposes were enhanced aerodynamics and extreme heat resistance. If Challenger had not exploded during liftoff, there was a very high probability of catastrophic failure anyway, as the vehicle was completely covered with ice. The RCC panels would have been completely destroyed. Before we go on, I conducted my own experiment with foam to try to simulate the failure. I believe the only way the bipod foam ramp fell off in flight was sabotage. To be more specific, I believe a release agent was applied during the foam application process. Let me demonstrate what I mean. First, I had to simulate the 2 struts that hold the shuttle to the external fuel tank. After looking through my shop, I found just what I needed. The flux capacitor I assembled from our unfixable washing machine. The 2 stabilizing struts had a remarkable similarity to the 2 shuttle struts. I bolted them to a 5-gallon bucket, the external fuel tank, applied the same type of foam, and then fashioned them into ramp shapes. I applied a release agent only to the left side.
A different release agent. This is Poly E's 2500. And again, we're going to try to simulate the force of 1,600 miles an hour. Force on the bipod ramp. And see what happens. Again, this is the side that has no release. Extremely durable. This piece is not coming off.
Just like Columbia, in my experiment about 90% of the ramp came off. For what it's worth, I believe the better way to apply the foam was to mound it all the way around, which doubles the attached surface area, meaning stronger, and at the same time greatly enhancing its aerodynamics. I have a lot of experience with sprayed-on foam. Here I am poly-easing up so I will be able to extract myself from a foam prototype snow sled I will be manufacturing. Without the release agent, I would be a goner here. Remember in the beginning, I told you I am an eccentric inventor. I know foam pretty much inside and out. I know its strengths and its weaknesses. It is very strong stuff, and it doesn't just fall off or come apart without some type of influence. This application is very similar to how NASA fashioned the biopod ramps. I would like to now focus on the reinforced carbon-carbon panels to help shed new light on their weaknesses. I have extensive experience molding and fabricating with many different materials. Here I am vacuum forming and rotomolding parts for my new sleds. I'm definitely not making highly precision RCC panels, but there are some similarities. As the inventor and manufacturer, it is my responsibility to test all my products and try to push them to their breaking points. Here at the factory, we are deep freezing the sleds to simulate the natural environment they will be used in. Obviously, we cannot use materials that will fracture in conditions of extreme stress and below zero temperatures. Many of the astronauts and engineers assumed that the RCC panels were bulletproof. After all, why call them reinforced carbon-carbon panels if they weren't? As it turned out, they weren't any stronger than the astronauts' fiberglass corvettes. And yes, the colder they were, the more fragile they became. At the time of the foam strike, the panels must have already been sub-zero. Only after the disaster did NASA test the impact performance of the panels with the chicken gun in warm weather, not at sub-zero temperatures. There's a good chance the damage to the wing was much more destructive than they thought. If they had permitted the space and ground photos, the damage may have appeared very obvious. I know that when performing in new and extreme conditions, unforeseen stuff happens. Unfortunately for Columbia, their shield of faith had a major vulnerability, and it cost the lives of all 7 astronauts. Because of the unprecedented synchronicity the mission patch has with Dealey Plaza, the Freemasons, and our nation's Great Seal, it is almost impossible not to see the uncanny similarities. It is almost an exact fingerprint. And let's not forget that Columbia started breaking up directly over the 2 pilots' hometowns, which are only 112 miles apart. This is a great big planet with a lot of land area. The odds of this happening are completely incomprehensible. Something significant has happened here. And so, because of all this, I am made to believe that this heinous act was perpetrated by the cabal. But why and how? Before I try to answer these questions, we need to look at some more numbers. Again, I must say, I have never been a big numerologist enthusiast, but there's compelling evidence here. In spiritual numerology, the numbers 11, 13, and 33 are the 3 master numbers, the highest being 33. To the occultists, the number 11 is the most important because it is the highest number of evil possible, and it represents the number of the planned Masonic Antichrist. Number 13 is another critically important number. It represents extreme rebellion against authority, God. Columbia's real launch sequence was STS-113. Here we have both 11 and 13 together. The number 39 represents obedience to the Antichrist. Columbia lifted off at 9:39 a.m. on 1/16/03. NASA could have chosen any time they wanted to lift Columbia off, because it wasn't rendezvousing with the space station or Hubble telescope, which would have required precision timing. Columbia spent 39 days on the launch pad, planned to the exact minute when it was rolled out on December 9th. Columbia took off from launch pad 39A. Columbia flew a 39-degree orbit around Earth the entire mission. On re-entry day, the blue crew was awakened with music at 4:39 p.m. The red crew was awakened at 1:39 a.m. Columbia broke up 39 miles above Texas. Columbia was the second high-profile disaster on the 33rd parallel at Dallas area. This shuttle broke up over Dallas 39 years after Kennedy's assassination. Only 39% of Columbia's debris was recovered. It must be noted that in 1996, NASA began consolidating dozens of shuttle contracts under one prime contractor, the newly formed United Space Alliance, a partnership between Boeing and Lockheed Martin. The 6-year contract was supposed to save NASA more than $500 million a year. It was at this point in time when big things started to go wrong. Whether Columbia was sacrificed because it was the oldest vehicle in the fleet, or for the fact that many didn't think it was a very important mission, could it have been that they were trying to end the shuttle program in a very spectacular way so they could profit handsomely building the next round of more expensive spacecraft? We are never really going to know. And now for the ending. I want to show you how the Great Key unlocks our future. The Cabal's final objective is to create a satanic World War III in which the Antichrist will become the supreme ruler. They will do everything in their power to prevent the capstone of human consciousness from being set. By preventing us from becoming one whole, self-actualized world is their only way to guarantee a one world order with them in control and only them left to reside on Earth. The very heart of evil and the highest possible rebellion against God. This small group of extraordinarily rich and powerful men has had a patriarchal rule of Earth for thousands of years. They have started and profited from every major war in the history of civilization and will continue to do so exponentially with worldwide devastation. We, as a one-world civilization, need to ask, how and when will the last and final war begin, and is it preventable? The Great Key may help us answer these questions. Remember, the 13 stars over the eagle's head represents the original 13 lost tribes of Israel. But in the Great Key, the 13 tribes unite into a single shooting star, emerging through a ring of fire. So what does this tell us? All the evidence suggests that the Luciferication global terrorists, meaning the 13 lost tribes, will unite once again. The U.S., Britain, and Israel become the three leading assassins. They are fabricating a bogus war between Islamic fundamentalists in the West. Their plan is to have the Islamic, Muslim Arabic world and the Zionist state of Israel mutually destroy each other. Moreover, all other nations will become divided on the issue and will become physically, morally, spiritually, and economically destroyed. This will result in their final objective, a one world order with the Antichrist as its supreme ruler. A single missile will launch from near Tel Aviv, which is directly located on the 33rd parallel, and upon approaching its target, it will separate into 13 shooting arrows, raining down from the sky. This metropolis, also located directly on the 33rd parallel, will be stricken from the earth, and all the sand will become glass. Again, the all-seeing eye in the key now represents a nuclear explosion, the third killing. Israel will be sacrificed as the other two assassins remain shrouded by their deceptive neutrality. This event will radically reshape the political fate of the world, drastically reducing the global population and at the same time destroying the psychic and spiritual well-being of humanity. This war will be known as the Trinity War. It will be our third and last world war. In 1945, Harry S. Truman, as the 33rd president and a 33rd degree Mason, initiated the nuclear age, the crowning success of alchemy, when the first atomic bomb, codenamed Trinity, exploded on the 33rd parallel at White Sands in Alamogordo, New Mexico. My father launched the world's very first ICBM. It is now my duty to help prevent the last and final launches. I am honored to serve in this capacity. I wish JFK was here today to lead and guide us to a solution. Let us reflect on his passion for peace, and hopefully, by working together, we can finally and firmly set the capstone atop the pyramid of human consciousness. Godspeed.